Welcome back. This is People's History, where we talk about AP World History, and then, just some fun stuff afterwards. Again, we're working out of Ways of the World. This is written by Robert Strayer and Eric Nelson. This is the textbook that my high school uses. I highly recommend it. I think that they do a fantastic job with that. Sorry about the shaky of the camera. I have moved the camera angle. As you guys know, I barely know what I'm doing half the time in class anyway. So why would it be any different when we're filming a YouTube video? So just kind of talking about, we're talking about the colonization of Africa, Asia, and Oceania and its effect on the people. So we're just going to hop right back into it. I'm going to give you guys some assessments of that time period. Hopefully this helps you guys a little bit, kind of focus in what to kind of take out of this time period and what was going on within Africa itself. So what ended up taking place was that we had a further integration of Africa, Asia, and Oceania into a global society. Remember that they were very, very excluded from the global marketplace. Within reason, okay, they would use the goods on the global marketplace, but as far as the people themselves, they bought and sold, and that was it. Now you're starting to see this integration of those countries. We also saw modernized technology being used and integrated into these countries when before it was met with resistance, and some movements of independence. Mostly what we're talking about with that is India, and India's movement towards independence, which began during the Second Industrial Revolution. So we'll start with some social and cultural impacts. So Western education done by missionaries and government schools was really something that revolutionized these continents when you're talking about Africa and Asia and the islands of Oceania. And this took place through, like I said, missionaries and government schools. And what it gave the people was access to better jobs. Many of the illiterate people of that area saw this ability to educate themselves and to gain knowledge of these European colonizers as nearly like mystic and magical, in that they had the ability to become equals with the people that are colonizing, at least when it came to intelligence and or knowledge. And so a lot of them really hopped in full bore. A negative aspect to that, however, which we see lots of times in the United States when we talk to people, is that you start to see this superiority, or this idea of superiority, by those that know against those that don't know. And so we saw that a lot in Africa, where they would consider their illiterate neighbors inferior to them. Others saw it as a unification of the people. This is really what took place in India. They began to educate themselves about what is going on in their country within the United Kingdom, under United Kingdom rule. And so kind of this galvanization is kind of what led to the 20th century revolt and the removal of the British colonizers. So religion, we're going to talk a little bit more about spreading of religion. Mostly when it comes to the spreading of religion during this time period, we're talking about Christianity exclusively. The Pacific Ocean and the non-Muslim African nations saw the biggest growth in Christianity during this time period. Remember, the Americas has already been conquered by Spain, and the British for that matter. And so we've already seen kind of the Christian foothold take place in those countries. In Africa and Asia, we haven't seen that same type of religious diffusion. And so Africa saw by the year 1910, 10,000 missionaries going into Africa to help educate and to help convert the African people to Christianity. Remember when we talked about earlier in the first video, the civilizing mission, right? Where they're trying to civilize the people of these colonies. That's what I'm talking about, is the spread and the diffusion of religion, the spread and diffusion of education. This gave the people the message of a more powerful global view of the religion. they saw themselves as a part of a global religion. So in other words, the feeling that we all believe the same thing can be really unifying. A great example of this is in Oceania during this time period. We talk about countries like Fiji, Tonga, and Hawaii. They all seem to rally around this Christian belief, and as a result, they kind of galvanize themselves as entities. However, we did have some, it was met with some resistance. So we had some continuity of some of their pre-Christian ideals. This led to a skiff in some of those countries. And some of those ideals that were really challenged were the things like sex and marriage, like marriage or sex outside of marriage, what marriage is, should it be polygamous, should it be monogamous? And it got into an argument about Old Testament versus New Testament. So if you go Old Testament, you're talking about Abraham and his many wives. And so we had a lot of these countries that were colonized and being converted into Christianity, where the New Testament is man, woman. The Old Testament refers to Abraham and Isaac and some of these as having multiple wives. And so that was met with resistance. For others, it was more of like a continuity or a desire to have continuity within the religious practices previous to Christianity. So a great example of that would be the Gyuku. Okay, their dividing factor was the female circumcision of pubescent girls. And it was seen as a rite of passage once a girl hit puberty to then be circumcised. However, the Christian missionaries that came into the area saw it as defacing God's creation and that it was an archaic practice that should be stopped. And so in 1929, they began to try to ban that practice. What ended up taking place was this led to thousands leaving the church, the Christian church, and forming their own Christian church, version of Christianity. And within that version of Christianity, they use things like protective charms, medicine, traditional herbal medicine, non-Western, medicine men, and then some even kept some of their old gods as a measure of continuity. So we're going to kind of stop there. That's just kind of some overviews of the chapter. Remember, nothing ever replaces doing the reading and gathering the knowledge for yourself. All we're doing here is kind of trying to fill in the gaps, give you guys direction. Remember, I gave you guys a bunch of different examples. What I would do is I would explore those examples further. You should have plenty of examples to use on the AP exam. If an LEQ comes up with something along the lines of to what extent did social Darwinism play in the social structure of Africa during the second industrial revolution, you guys should have like the Gyuku. You should have Ghana as an example of the different ways that you could talk about how colonization really helped, or excuse me, really impacted the native people of Africa. It was really fun. I'm super excited I get to talk to you guys again. I apologize for not having those other two videos up. I will backtrack before you guys have to take the AP exam this year. I will throw those two videos up, get them going. I did lecture them in my class, but I'll record a little synopsis of the two chapters. So if you want to go back and review before in May, we can do that. Okay, so that is the nuts and bolts. If all you wanted was straight history, I appreciate you. I think that's awesome. Remember, you're going to do amazing things in your life. Analyze the heck out of everything. Follow the $, see where everything's going. So good to talk to you guys, and have a good evening. If you want to hang out and talk a little bit about My Chemical Romance, you want me to talk about Phoenix a little bit, I am going to. And then I think I'm going to talk a tiny bit about The Witcher, a Netflix show that kind of kicked off while we were on break. I'm going to do that. So for those of you guys going to hang out, super dope. I'm so excited to talk to you guys. For those of you guys that are going to bounce, thank you so much for being a part of the show and listening, and hopefully you guys got something out of it. And for the next quiz that's going to pop up, you have a little bit of knowledge to handle that. Thanks, and I'll talk to you in a second.